Help support the show by going to the Amazon.com search bar on the FBIA podcast webpage when doing your online shopping. From movies to groceries, Amazon has everything. Go to the website and use our show's search box to help send 10% of your purchase to the show. The search box will take you right back to the Amazon webpage. No extra cost to you, just support for the show. Again, that's FBIApodcast.com and look for the search box just under our logo.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Football is America with Ron and Kyle. I'm Ron.
And I am Kyle, and today we are joined by Jeremy, who is a writer from prideofdetroit.com, which is the Lions blog and team page, part of the SB Nation community. Jeremy is here today to discuss the Lions with us, the 2014 season and beyond. Jeremy, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, so let's talk about you a little bit. First chance for a lot of the people on your site to hear your voice and get to know a little bit about you. So let's talk about you and this team. How long have you been a fan of the Lions?
Well, I grew up in Michigan, in a suburb of Detroit, so I've basically been one my entire life. From a really early age, I actually had season tickets, and I went with my family, and it just became a part of me very quickly. It became a part of my identity, and up until, ironically, the 0-16 season in 2008, I had season tickets. So, yeah, and it was just kind of a happenstance that was the season that I stopped going. I ended up moving across the country, but my love for the Lions hasn't dwindled at all since then.
Yeah, if you're gonna stick through an 0-16, you're gonna stick through anything,
right? Yeah, I don't think if I can make it through that, I can make it through anything.
Yeah, you can just eyes forward. What else you got, universe? Let's do this.
Come at me, bro.
Exactly. So what is it that gave you the desire or the drive to go ahead and become professional or semi-professional? I mean, everybody's quick answer is, I'm not professional, I'm not getting paid, but
right.
You're still putting the time in. So what was the motivation there to just go from casual fan to actual sports writer?
I would say it's a release, really. With all the stress that comes with being a Lions fan, just kind of keeping it inside or, just sharing it with a couple of friends isn't enough. I feel like I'll have a brain aneurysm if I don't release it in some way or form. And sports writing just happened to be a really nice way of doing that. And it's also a way of kind of having some sort of control over the riot that is Lions fandom. I feel like I can be like the guy in Animal House that says everything is fine, there's nothing to see here, don't panic. Even when everything points to panic, the sky is falling.
I'm not a Lions fan, but I instantly understood as you were talking, needing to let out the pain of being a Lions fan. Just based on second and third hand information, I'm like, yep, that checks out. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, okay, and as you said, you grew up with the team. You're there, season tickets, family event. So I have to imagine that you have a lot of memories of Lions football, both good and bad, obviously. So what is going to stand out to you as like your strongest memory of the team? And it could be a season, it could be a play, it could just be, heck, talking about the game on the ride home with your family. Whatever you got, we are dying to hear about this.
Yeah, I'll try to start with a good memory because those are kind of few and far between. But the 2011 season, which, actually happens to be after I started having season tickets, was just so fun of a season for Lions fans. The first time they made the playoffs in over 10 years. And it featured so many crazy comeback wins. One against Dallas at home where Calvin had like over 300 yards. And the culmination of that season happened to be when they played in Oakland, which was a game I actually attended in the Black Hole. And they had I think it was a 98-yard drive to win that game at the end of the game, and it basically sent them to the playoffs. And it's a memory I won't ever forget, because the Raiders had a 63 or 64-yard field goal attempt at the very end of the game to win it, and I'm sitting there paralyzed in fear, not really sure if I want it to go in or out, because I'm sitting in the middle of the Black Hole. If it goes in, everyone around me is going to be happy, which means I can bolt out of there without any trouble. If you missed it, then I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to get mugged. I don't know if I'm going to get stabbed. I didn't know what was going to happen. Luckily,
you were getting stabbed.
Obviously, because I'm here talking to you today, but it was an experience, and it's one I'm definitely never going to forget.
That takes some major balls, by the way.
Yeah.
To go to the Black Hole as the visiting team and sit in the middle of basically their section.
Yeah.
and be the other team's rep. And you're almost borderline insane, I think.
And by myself, I'm a complete coward, but I was rolling 4 or 5 other guys deep, so I felt at least a little bit of a safety net there.
That's more of a disillusion when dealing with Oakland on its own, but especially in the Black Hole. When you say strongest memory, I'm there in the Black Hole. I'm like, oh, well, of course it's a strong memory because of the kidney transplant, but it worked out being more positive than you really had any right to have it happen. The fact that you did not get assaulted is amazing.
I can't tell you how many people, like minutes before I was at the stadium, were like, you need to change your mind. You need to not wear your Lions jersey. You need to switch seats with somebody. This is a bad idea. But I'm a pretty good away fan. I'm not obnoxious. So the worst we had was, I think, a chicken wing and a churro thrown at us. So we got out pretty easily.
Yeah, I remember Kyle and I a couple of years ago went to a Colts game in Indianapolis. Kyle's a big Colts fan, and we had gotten some tickets from somebody who had been a season ticket holder who just basically sold their tickets all the time. And we actually ran into a couple of fans that we talked to while we were there quite a bit. And they were like, it's so refreshing to have home fans here. He's like, because normally it's just jackass fans sitting back there from the other team, just making messes, being obnoxious and stuff. So if you're a good away fan, most of the time you can get away with quite a bit.
Right.
Even if you're not a good away fan, you can get away with pretty much anything in Indy because they are just maybe a little too polite to do anything about it. I don't think they really care. It's not exactly a violent fan base kind of area.
They just go home and pray for you.
Pretty much.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the 2014 Lions here, shall we?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, so as it seems to be kind of the trend over the last few years, the Lions are the fourth quarter team.
Right.
And albeit winning or losing, there was a lot of questions stirring throughout the season. Is Stafford the guy? What will happen with Sue? Will they ever get the running back position figured out? Will RoboCop save the day? Etc. But looking back on the season, how do you interpret the whole thing? Was it a success? Was it a failure? Or were there any successes of note that you can point out for us?
I would say overall in the season, it had to be a success just based on Lions standards. I would say it's not what most people wanted in the end, especially with an 11-5 record. So we were all just craving that first playoff win in over 20 years. The Lions have only had one playoff win in the Super Bowl era. So, we're craving that win like crack right now. And it was a disappointment for it not to happen, and especially in the brutal way that it happened with the pass interference call. But overall, it had to be what most Lions fans considered a success, especially on the defensive end, which was an extreme pleasure to watch a defense like that, because the Lions, I'm not sure, have ever had a defense like they did last year, with a run defense that was not only best in the league, but one of the best ever, really. And it's just, it's not something that we're used to seeing. So it was something that we were really excited to see. And we just kept waiting for the offense to turn the corner under new offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi, and it never really happened, and that's kind of where everything fell short.
Now, I want to ask you about the head of house staff, the head coach and the GM. One thing that struck me in preseason was everybody was predicting doom on the coaching front because Jim Caldwell is not a fiery, passionate guy. He's about as exciting as white toast with a glass of water for dipping. I mean, he is not a thrilling man.
I think you're overstating it a bit.
Well, he used to be a coach for the Colts, so I'm being really nice.
Oh no, I'm saying that that's too exciting for him.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to pump him up a little, but you know, in any case, everybody was saying this is terrible. And by the way, Lovie Smith is an amazing hire in Tampa. You having a little knowledge of Lovie Smith, you're probably chuckling to yourself about that. But,
a little bit, yeah.
But given the successes on the year, I mean, does Caldwell really get much of that credit? Being an offensive guy, like you said, there were some offensive struggles, and the defense is what won the day. Does he get any of the credit on the year, or is that just kind of the defensive coordinator and the players?
Yeah, most Lions fans, myself included, are giving the majority of the credit to Terrell Austin, the defensive coordinator. I have very mixed feelings on Jim Caldwell. I wasn't really a fan of the hire when it happened, and there were a lot of times throughout the season where his kind of conservative play calling, not going for it on fourth downs, really bugged me. And then there was a strange game in the middle of the season where he suddenly turned into an aggressive coach. We went for it on fourth down a couple times. We had a couple, I think it was 2 fake punts in one game, and it was almost like he was giving all of his critics a big middle finger. But then right after that game, he went back to conservative Caldwell. And I think it really bit them in the playoff game against Dallas. I mean, there was that controversial pass interference call. And right after that, the Lions had a 4th and 1 and could have completely, changed the narrative right there and gone for it. But he ended up not going for it, taking a delay game penalty, and then muffed the punt. And then the Cowboys go down, score, win the game. So it's hard to put every bit of success on the defensive coordinator and every bit of failure on Jim Caldwell, but at the same time, that's kind of how I view it, to be honest.
Well, and now coming into this next year with, let's say, reduced expectations on the defense. I mean, even without the losses, that was one monster of a defense last year. So you always have to expect a little redaction, but now you're going to be getting into a point where you can really expect him to start taking hold of the offense. He's had a year now, see who works, who doesn't, start really mentoring people. Do you need to see improvement in the offense this next year before he starts to get on the hot seat, or has he bought himself any additional time with the good record this year?
There definitely needs to be at least a significant turnaround this year with all the talent that the Lions have at the skill positions. I mean, Stafford, Calvin Johnson, Golden Tate. You can't argue with those players and those talent. If you're in the bottom half of the league in offensive scoring with those guys, then something's wrong with you. But it's worth noting that the Lions also had first-time offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi from the Saints. This is the first time he's ever had an offensive coordinator gig, and he actually took most of the brunt of the complaints last year. But I do think that, like you said, Caldwell comes from an offensive standpoint too. So he was brought in promising to quote unquote fix Stafford, and so far the results aren't very good. So they both
not seeing a lot of mechanic changes. Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting because he started out the season very well, and everyone thought maybe this is a genius in the making, and it just didn't hold up when things hit a rough patch, and suddenly you saw Stafford kind of relying back on his back foot throws and sidearm things, and while that alone isn't an issue, I mean, you can be a gunslinger and be okay, but it hasn't worked out for Stafford like we hoped.
a lot of times, you compare your quarterbacks, it doesn't necessarily make sense, but give me a little leeway on this one. But would you be willing to accept me comparing Matt Stafford to Jay Cutler, but with emotion this time?
My Lions fandom does not allow me to accept that, but you can go ahead.
That is a fantastic answer.
Let me give you the reason why I made Kyle read that, even though I typed it to him.
I was all too happy to read that, and you know it.
So one of the things that we talked about this year is that Matt Stafford is Jay Cutler, and they are Phillip Rivers, or they have some kind of love child. I don't really know what it is.
Oh yeah, I was way off my meds that day.
What we were getting at was that both quarterbacks kind of seem like the kind of QBs that could give you the hope that you need for a preseason or for a postseason, but can't actually get you anywhere. Like they seem like the kind of guys that have all of the talent to win a Super Bowl, but without an enormous amount of talent around them, they're can't.
Undisciplined.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I get that comparison, and I would even, I would throw Joe Flacco into that same kind of category, except he won a Super Bowl. So I think all of those quarterbacks really have the potential to take someone to the Super Bowl and win it. But you're right. They do need an amount of coddling, and they need a good defense to carry them when, the mental mistakes happen. Cause that's the thing with all those quarterbacks is the mental mistakes are there more often than, your elite tier quarterbacks.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about the other personnel we've got. We focus on Stafford, and I think all of us could sit here and talk about, him all day and his comparison to the rest of the NFC North, and of course his hilarious commercial a couple of years ago where he gets beat by Aaron Rodgers. And
had to get that jab.
Yeah.
I told
you
take
that one to the chin.
I told you what to expect. You knew what you were getting into coming into this. Let's talk some of the personnel moves that happened in the offseason, because there was a lot that happened with the Lions that some of it very, very confusing. And
is there anything big that happened? I don't know.
Let's first get through a couple of these more minor ones.
Sure.
George Johnson leaves, and Andre Fluellen and Mosley, they're all gone. And then also Nick Fairley takes off and signs a 1-year deal with the Rams. Now, that is all of your defensive line with Sue included.
Right.
Pretty much. I mean, outside of one guy. And you also lost Reggie Bush. That doesn't really help your backfield concerns. I know you've got Riddick there, and you guys have got some promising players, but you still don't have that feature back like Eddie Lacy or Matt Forte or Adrian Peterson. You guys don't have that. And you have the Calvin Johnson and stuff, but everybody's starting to catch up in the receiver realm in the division. Yeah. And with the defensive line pretty much gutted, you have personnel on your defense that have played both in the 3-4 and the 4-3. Is it time for them to say, okay, let's just shift it? Because the Bears are doing it this year as well. They're switching to that 3-4, which is a huge deal. Right. And would it be time to say, okay, since our entire defensive line has to be completely restructured, let's just go ahead and do the flip?
I think the answer is both yes and no there. The Lions have all the coaching personnel for it. They have all these guys with the Ravens background who've been running at least some version of the 3-4 for quite some time now. But I do think that at least when you get to the second level of the Lions defense, the linebackers and the safeties, it really still leans towards a 4-3 kind of system. My biggest concern with moving to a 3-4 is when you have a linebacker like DeAndre Levy, who's borderline Pro Bowl, probably should be Pro Bowl level, and you throw a whole new system his way, you never really know how that's going to work out. With, Haloti Ngata now on the team, and they just picked up another kind of pass rushing defensive tackle in Tyron Walker, I really think they're going to mix up some looks of 3-4, but I think their base is still going to be a 4-3. I don't think they're ready to overhaul everything quite just yet, even though they're going through a lot of changes on defense. I think Terrell Austin, the defensive coordinator, is just he worked magic last year with kind of, I mean, Nick Fairley wasn't on the team for the last half of the season with an injury. They shuffled around a lot of kind of unknown parts, and I think he can do it again this year. But, obviously with Ndamukong Suh gone, he's got a bigger challenge ahead of him. But I think he's still going to keep him 4-3, and that's kind of the message that we've heard out of the offseason so far. But don't be surprised to see some 3-4 looks mixed in here and there as well.
All right, so since we're still on the topic, let's talk Ndamukong Suh.
Okay.
All right.
I'm prepared, I guess.
Are you ready? Are you sitting down?
Yeah, I'm transitioning to the fetal position right now, so let's just do it.
Well, that's understandable. I mean, he was the best thing to happen to Detroit since RoboCop.
The first one, right?
Well, yeah. Not that remake. That
Okay.
didn't happen. I didn't even see it. It doesn't exist.
Explain to us the relationship, and I don't know how much inside you get with the locker room. Some of the writers, they have press passes and stuff like that and credentials, but kind of walk us through what really happened here, because it just kind of seems like the whole thing was just really mucked up bad. Like in my opinion, this is something they should have solved last
Right.
off season, and you wouldn't be in the situation that you're in now, where basically you have Haloti Ngata, a 32-year-old defensive tackle, and that is the anchor of your defense now.
Right. I mean, you can really, and this is a bit of a stretch, but not completely a stretch, but you could bring this back all the way back to the Matt Millen era, because the Lions really got in trouble right away by having top 5 picks, 3 different top 5 picks very close to each other. And that was before the new CBA bargaining agreement, where rookie contracts were out of control. So the Lions were stuck with is a bad word for it, but they had Calvin Johnson, Matthew Stafford, and Ndamukong Suh getting paid a ton of money, basically, and all on their rookie contracts. So as the seasons wore on, they had no money for free agency at all. So they would have to kick back these deals, readjust them so that basically they free up cap space in the now, and then are screwed later. And finally that those numbers finally came up to them in this offseason. But you're right, they had a chance last offseason to get something done. I guess Martin Mayhew, the general manager, kind of displayed this crazy optimism throughout last offseason and this offseason, where he's like, oh yeah, it'll get done, don't worry about it. And so he cut off negotiations after kind of a stalemate last year, refused to negotiate during the season, and then, played the same tune this offseason, saying, oh yeah, don't worry, it's going to get done, we're confident. And because of all the cap space problems, they couldn't franchise him. He was way too costly with all the restructures. And then by the time, at least according to kind of Sue's account, by the time the Lions finally offered him a deal that he thought he was worth, Miami had already overbid him. And that was that.
The cap is a little bit of a concern right now anyway, right? The Lions are sitting at roughly 4.2 million.
Right.
Somewhere right around there. So at this point, given the losses, I mean, now you have to have a lot of concern with being able to bring people in. Is there belief that there will be sufficient talent in the draft to get the team to a competitive level, or is this going to be kind of a kick the tires on maybe an older player, a veteran, something for a year or two until the cap situation can be a little more favorable?
I expect the Lions to maybe make 1 or 2 more signings for depth, but I wouldn't expect them to really get a starter at this point. Maybe at left guard, because that remains a starting position that literally has no starter. But it really seems like they're putting all their eggs in the draft basket. They really have to hit a home run, and it's going to be tough this year because getting Ngata costs them a 4th and a 5th. So basically they have the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round to get something done. And if they don't hit on at least 2 of those 3, maybe even they need to hit on all 3 of those 3, they could be in real trouble this year.
Well, and is there any sense or indication that you've got that there's particular mindset to Caldwell as far as like left guard? You said that's definite position of need. to my knowledge, he favors veterans there, but could you see him taking a rookie to fill in the line?
Yeah, definitely. The offensive line was definitely probably, well, I would say the biggest culprit of the offensive failures, both at left guard and right tackle. And so far, Caldwell's MO has been getting guys that are kind of versatile along the line. So there are a couple guys in this upcoming draft that I think could either fill in the right tackle position or move inside to one of the guard positions. And I really think that's something the Lions are likely to target in the first or second round, and they would be wise to do so.
Now, I got kind of a personal grievance. Calvin Johnson is easily one of the most physically talented receivers to ever play the game. Definitely has the mental aspect and has a very good attitude, not a diva, about as far away from being a diva wide receiver as you can get. And he's definitely worth his money, but now there's starting to be a little bit of an injury concern with him to where it's recurring and a legitimate bit of awareness that has to be had.
Sure.
I thought that the Golden Tate signing was brilliant when it happened. It was very smart of him to be willing to take that number 2 role, and he was utilized very well. But going forward, I mean, how much longer can Calvin Johnson be kept around hitting higher and higher cap numbers while still maintaining injury? Is this something where the team and the fans are going to be concerned with, or is he too much of just a valuable player and face of the franchise for that to even come into the mindset of letting him go or trading him?
The first I've really heard of anything like that came this offseason from fans that he might be getting overpaid a little bit. But the majority of fans and everything I've heard from the front office or pretty much anybody associated with the Detroit Lions is this guy's going to be a Lion until he retires. And it's hard to argue with that, even though you can kind of see that his talent has dropped off at least a little bit, and the injuries are a bit of a concern. But I mean, there's nothing he can do about that. He was on the cover of Madden a few years ago, so it was only a matter of time before it caught up with him. So
nice.
So I don't really see Calvin ever going anywhere. It might be a situation like what the Cardinals have with Larry Fitzgerald, where rumors pop up every now and then that maybe he wants out, maybe it's time for him to go to a contender, or it's just not worth the Cardinals having him around anymore. But I would be shocked to see Calvin Johnson leave Detroit in the next 5 years. I think he's around for the long haul.
And given his production, still being able to get out there and just totally dominate games, even the week he comes back after being out for however many weeks, there's really no reason to make an adjustment on him. But is he the type of player, from what we know about him now, if it does come down to it, like you mentioned, Larry Fitzgerald, would he be willing to restructure a contract if he believed that the team was in a position to win?
I think so. I can't be inside his head, but he certainly seems like the personality type that would do something like that. The Lions have been, extremely generous to him. They made him the highest paid wide receiver ever when he signed his extension a couple years ago. And from what I hear, he loves the team and he loves the city. Or if he doesn't, he's been extremely quiet about it all. So in my mind, I think he believes in the system. He and Matthew Stafford have a pretty good relationship. So I don't see him, being stubborn about anything like that. He's just not that type of guy.
Now, with all the questions we've got roster-wise on defense, the sort of flux that the team is in at a few of the key positions, and especially given the very difficult division that the Lions are in, is there reasonable expectation to be a perennial playoff contender in the upcoming years, or have expectations sort of dwindled seeing a few of these key personnel moving on?
I think morale is still pretty high. If the Nada trade hadn't happened, I don't know. I mean, we'd all be buried in a ditch somewhere, fearing the ghost of 0-16. But with him around, and really the rest of the defense beyond the interior of the defensive line unchanged, I don't think there's that big of an expectation. I mean, there's an expectation of a drop off on defense, but not nearly as big as I think some of the national guys are seeing it. I still expect this to be a top 10 defense next year. The question still remains to me, what's going to happen with the offense? Is it finally going to turn the corner? Is Stafford finally going to look like not only an above average quarterback, but starting the conversation of the dreaded elite quarterback conversation that everyone loves so much?
Well, I think you're valid to ask those questions of your quarterback. He was taken number 1 overall, and I don't think it's unjust of the fans to really want him to take the next step, especially when so much of the media criticism about his play is based on his mechanics. The one thing that stood out to me vividly during the head coaching search was a lot of people asked him, are you going to be okay if a new head coach shows up and says, hey, we got to work on your mechanics? And he said, essentially, no, my mechanics are fine. I'm not changing.
Yeah.
That struck me as a problem.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the front office didn't seem to care, because that was their 100% focus on their new staff, is someone who's going to fix Stafford. So they looked at Ken Wisenhunt. They looked at Jim Caldwell, who has a quarterback coaching history, and then Joe Lombardi, worked with Drew Brees. So they got all these coaches who've worked with elite quarterbacks, and the hope is that eventually it'll click with Stafford. It's interesting though, because a former player who's no longer in the NFL, Lawrence Jackson, who went to USC and was on the Lions for a couple of years, he came out and completely trashed the Lions organization, specifically kind of Jim Schwartz, the former head coach, and just saying like how much they coddled Matthew Stafford while they were coach. And it's hard to argue against that. I mean, obviously we weren't there, so we don't know exactly what he meant by coddled, but Stafford got a little lazy with his mechanics. And while I think the sidearm thing and sometimes the throwing off your back foot is a little overplayed, he does have a big issue with pocket presence, and he doesn't recognize when he can step up in the pocket. He doesn't recognize where to escape from the pocket or when to just take a sack. And those sort of things are the things that Caldwell was expected to come in and fix. And so far the results are mixed, but if like I was saying before, if they don't fix it this season, like time's up really. Stafford has had more than enough chances, and every single offseason we seem to ask, is this the year that he turns the corner? And you run out of corners by a certain amount of years.
And you just brought up Jim Schwartz, and for some reason I had not had him in my head, and you mentioning him sparked up. How great was it? You're already laughing, and that's why I paused. How great was it to have him back?
Oh my God.
In Detroit?
Oh my God.
And how great was it really to have him lifted off the field by his new team's defensive players, especially at the end when they're like, yeah, we didn't want to do that. He made us practice that because he's a jackass. That's him sticking it to the Lions more than a little bit. And I think he was maybe a little too happy, maybe giving Stafford some comeuppance for the perceived lack of support during the trying times.
To be honest, that may have been worse than 0-16. I might take 3 consecutive 0-16s than watching Jim Schwartz get carried off of Ford Field ever again. It was the most infuriating image. Like I know the exact picture in my mind. I can picture the exact photo that was all over, newspapers the next day, and it lights my corneas on fire.
Very vivid imagery. Okay. I had to bring that up partially because in our fantasy football league that Ron and I are in, our former Army platoon sergeant is in it, big time Lions fan, and when I changed my team image to that photo, he once again requested that I would be removed from the league. So it is something that worked out well for me.
Let's be honest though, this is the same guy that because he was our platoon sergeant for a while. And when he left, we all got him a plaque, and it was this really nice big plaque with a picture of, Arctic soldiers, because we were in Alaska, and he's a big time Lions fan, and he loved it. He loved being, Army. He was just Army, and just lived and breathed it. And so we bought him this big, huge, it had to have been like a 15 by 20 plaque. And on it said, platoon sergeant, blah, blah, blah. And then in parentheses down at the bottom in smaller little letters and numbers says 0-16 Lions. Because it was right after the year they lost. And he has that plaque to this day still hanging up in his office. And he just, every time I look at it, I just hate all of you over again.
That's why he was mad when I went into his office unannounced.
That is cruel and unusual punishment, by the way. That is.
It is not unusual for a Detroit Lions fan. I hate to kick folks when they're down, but he made me do flutter kicks way too much, and he wasn't doing any of the other PT. Then he did the flutter kicks. No, I'm already tired. You can't hop in fresh and then smack talk. That's not how life works. That's a little off topic.
Fair enough. No, that's fair.
Yeah, PTSD. Why not? Anyway. I had intended to ask this a bit more concisely, and then I didn't because I'm terrible. What is it going to take to make this team? I'll just go flat out. What is it going to take to make this team a Super Bowl contender, given the Packers, given the Seahawks? The Cardinals are coming. The Rams actually have a quarterback now, but they have Jeff Fisher, so it's not like it's going to do anything. Right. So what is it going to take to really break out in the NFC and be a dominant team?
I hate to beat a drum to death here, Boris.
Oh, please.
But it's the offense. The offense really needs to turn a corner. I'm not at all scared of the Bears at this point. Sorry, Ron, but
I wouldn't be either. It's all right.
I am starting to get a little scared of the Vikings. I really think Teddy Bridgewater is going to turn that franchise around a bit.
But they got no AP though. They're probably not going to have AP when it comes down.
Yeah,
to it.
I don't know what's going on over there. I saw them wish him a happy birthday today on Twitter or something, and that led to a whole bunch of inappropriate.
I've never seen a man so mad that people won't support him and beating the hell out of his kids.
Right. Yeah. I saw way too many inappropriate spanking jokes today about his birthday, but he deserves it. Let's be honest.
Yes,
last week we had Chris Gates from the Vikings SB Nation page on, and he had a really good comment about it, and he was like, you want to know why people get offended? It's because when you look at it from the outside, it's an offensive thing to see or read about. He was like, that's why people are offended. It's horrible. Let's not gloss over it. Let's be blunt. And he put the whole thing very, very carefully and very, very well. And I think he kind of seemed like he was kind of resolved that Adrian Peterson would probably not be on the team this year.
Yeah, it's kind of a mess over there, and I'm fine to reap the benefits of that crazy relationship. But that just leaves the Packers, and the Lions have really played the Packers pretty competitively over the last 3 or 4 years. They've kind of held their offense somewhat in check. It's just the Lions' offense hasn't been able to do anything, and it's not like Green Bay has an amazing defense. The biggest hurdle the Lions have over Green Bay is just winning in Lambeau, which they haven't won in over 20 years. So in terms of winning the NFC North, it's certainly still within grasp. And, I think if you can win the NFC North, you could definitely contend for the entire NFC. The Lions were pretty darn close to beating a Dallas team that most people were riding high going into the playoffs after they, I didn't mean to bring this up kind of unintentionally after they kind of smoked the Colts, but
they way smoked the Colts. Don't even feel bad about that. We were talking about that game the week before. I'm like, the Colts aren't even going to show up. They don't have anything to play for. They made the playoffs, and then it was one of those like, way to go, Indy. I work with a whole lot of Dallas fans, and it was exactly what you expected.
Yeah.
But just remember that anytime the Lions can beat the Packers, I have a lot of really, really close Packers fans, tons and tons and tons of them. And I would say that probably 5 or 6 of my closest friends are Packers fans. And if they lose to the Bears, they're like, all right, old rivalry, the Bears got this one. And if they lose to the Vikings, they're like, all right, the Vikings, they got AP, they run all over the place. It's fine. But when they lose to the Lions, it is, and this goes for pretty much any NFC North team. Whenever someone loses to the Lions, it is like that. It is like the worst walk of shame that you would ever have to do. It would be, it's so awful to them. And they hate it so much. So when it happens, it's like, man, we lost the Lions, man. And if you can beat them, and I'm not in support of the Lions as a Bears fan, but I am as a fan of the NFL, and right. That if you can beat the Packers, as a Bears fan, I have to be happy about that.
Yeah, and the next time we do it, you're gonna have to send me some like video or some pictures of your Green Bay fans being all sad. That'll really make me feel good.
Oh yeah, I'll get some pictures. Yeah.
They often skip sad and go right into excuses.
Oh, of course. They're the untouchable team. They've got, the amazing fan base, and
there's two types of Packers fans. There's the ones that go, well, it was a cold day, or Eddie Lacy, he drank too much Gatorade, or something like that. Or there's the other ones that are just like, man, our team's so horrible. And I'm just like, shut up. You're the Packers. You have won the division every year for the last 5 years. Just shut your stupid mouths. I hate you.
Both of those kind of fans are equally annoying, aren't they?
Oh, I just want to beat everybody to death in that, just all of them.
You have one of the best historic franchises in NFL history. You can't complain about anything, at least to the face of a Lions fan, or, even the Bears or a Vikings fan at this point. You can't complain to them.
All they could complain about is the bandwagon fans. That's it. You got more bandwagon fans than any team in the league.
Yeah.
That's about the only negative.
They went from Brett Favre right to Aaron Rodgers, and I get that happens. I mean, even the Colts had a bad season in there, but they went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. It's cheating. I don't like it. Someone sold their soul, and someone needs to pay. It needs to happen. I want devastation. That's what I want.
Couldn't agree more. And to have a guy as annoying as Brett Favre be followed up with someone as annoying as discount double check Rodgers, it's like, do you have to be great and annoying? Can't you just be good and shut your mouth?
Well, hey, we're going to start pressing up against time here, and I would love to sit here and just dog on Aaron Rodgers for hours. I could do it.
I could listen to you guys do this for a couple hours and just every now and then be like, oh, by the way, they beat you by this score, and just fan those flames.
We got them once last year.
Let's go ahead and go into this last bit. How much hope do you see for next year? And it's you have to have some kind of realistic expectation. You communicate with the fans on a pretty regular basis through comments and forum and stuff like that with the webpage. What is the perceived expectation from them, and what is the realistic expectation that you can kind of give us for the team? Because, I mean, as we've talked about throughout this whole thing, is there's been a lot of changes, and there's going to have to be a lot of different areas that really step up to help, augment those changes. So what do you got for us?
We're kind of in a weird time where everyone's a little lost right now. We're still kind of in the nuclear aftermath of the Sioux thing. So there are a lot of people that are really, really down, but I think the majority of fans are still kind of like, this team went 11-5 last year. We can be at least that good this year. I tend to temper my expectations a lot because I'm a Lions fan, and I have been, and I know what usually happens. So
right.
I'm not exactly. I don't think this team has to make I don't think this is a roster that there's no way they're not making the playoffs or anything like that. I do think they certainly have the talent. I do think last year they kind of were on luck's side. There was a lot of close games that they pulled out kind of miraculously. So
Falcons game in London, that one strikes.
God. And that game happened at 6 a.m. where I'm living, so they went down 21-0 at 6:30, and I don't think I've ever been that angry that early in the morning, but it turned out a lot better. So I kind of imagine the pendulum could very well swing the other way this year with close games. That all being said, I do think this defense is still going to be very good. I think the offense should get better. I'm not really concerned about losing Reggie Bush. The offensive line can only have less injuries this year. So I think they'll be better. The big question is how much better. If they don't even need to be a top 10 offense, but if they're an above average offense this year, they could very well make the playoffs again. As for my expectations right now, a lot will change after the draft, but my expectations right now are pretty mediocre. I would say, like an 8-8, 9-7 type of year, just missing out on the playoffs.
In the NFC, though, that is not bad. That is a very tough conference, and 9-7 and missing out on the playoffs is not a terrible thing. A couple of years ago, the Cardinals were 10-6 and missed it.
Yeah.
So it's entirely possible, and then it just means a lot of people are going to complain about the seeding rule and how the Saints are going to get in with like a 6-10 season or whatever it is.
And let's be honest. I mean, you look at like the Seahawks, what they're doing right now, and is there anybody that if you're just comparing rosters, is there anybody that could really challenge that roster? I mean, come on, that team. That is another thing that just doesn't seem fair.
Yeah,
they're one bad sack on Russell Wilson away from having nothing, though.
That's true.
Yeah, that's not a bad point, and no quarterback is immune, so you never know. Injuries play a big part every season.
So let's go ahead and kind of open the floor to you. You have a the website and your Twitter and all that kind of stuff. We want to let you kind of put all of that out there. Plug whatever you need to plug. Go over anything that you think we missed that we should have talked about. Tell Kyle how horrible he is and how great I am, and and
He's
stuff
not
like
gonna
that.
tell you you're great. You're a Bears fan. The only
Yeah.
thing you have in common is hating the Packers. I can do that too, and I'm not even in the same freaking conference, so that makes me better than you.
All right, well,
I'm afraid he's got a point, but
Because I'll rip on Jay Cutler too.
it's hard. Okay, so my first plug then goes to smokingjcutler.com, my favorite website in the world.
wow,
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Slam dunk.
Yeah, but you can catch my stuff at prideofdetroit.com. I write about 2 to 3 articles a week there. You can follow me on Twitter at DetroitOnLion. I talk mostly about the Lions, though in the off season I tend to talk about the thousands upon thousands of hours I waste watching television. And that's all I really got to plug. I do have my own website, DetroitOnLion.com, although I haven't updated it in a while. I might start writing some TV stuff on there because I'm a bit of a TV addict. But other than that, just check me out on Twitter.
All right. Well, hey, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate and thank you for coming on and being a good sport about everything. We really appreciate that.
No problem. I'm a human punching bag being a Lions fan,
Well,
so
we're gonna
I
have
would be
you
a bad
back
sport.
on.
Okay.
We're definitely going to have you back on again. I had a lot of fun. I know Ron had a lot of fun. I think you had fun as well. And so definitely after the drafts, we're going to get your take on what happened. Heck, you could even call us as soon as the Bears make their pick and rip on or lament it, depending on whatever the case may be.
That sounds like too tempting of an offer to pass up, so I'm in.
There we go.
Damn it.
With the 7th overall, Marcus Mariota, and then it's just, oh, look at that, and then it's laughing.
You won't be able to get a hold of me at that point. I will have already drank an entire bottle of whiskey before you can get my phone to ring.
Put himself into such a white hot rage that his body temperature will rise so much that he will barrow just right into the center of the earth. Just bam, straight down.
Hey, just take all the other Bears fans with you if you don't mind.
Yes.
Oh, good one. All right, Jeremy. Hey, thank you so much. We got to let you go, though, okay? You take
Have a
care.
good night, guys.
Thank
You
you
too.
so much. Once again, that was Jeremy, writer from prideofdetroit.com. I had a lot of fun with him on.
Man, that was fun. That's probably the most fun we've had, just fun-wise, interview-wise, and banter and stuff like that.
He was willing to play around and have a good time, and that is excellent. That definitely makes me want to check out the website. I mean, that's probably a fun community there. You got to enjoy the guys who are fans of teams that don't do so well, and they're self-aware of that. And especially right now, it's like, look, we're doing good. I've got a bad feeling about that. That's very nerve-wracking to me that we're winning. I don't like it. That's not our comfort zone.
Not only is he self-aware, but he is also aware of the teams around him. Like he knows what he has to deal with. He knows that, you know, the Bears are going to be rebuilding, and he knows that the Vikings are a wild card, and that the Packers are the big brother right now. And he knows where his team rests
Right now.
Right, but he knows where his
Not always, but right now the Packers are the big
just
brother.
right now. We only live this one season at a time, Kyle.
Okay, well, what about the previous infinity seasons?
All I know is that the Bears still have an overall win-loss over the Packers.
Do they?
Yes, they do.
How much is that dwindling?
It was down to 3.
And what is their win? Okay, and what is the Bears' win-loss over the Packers in the Super Bowl era?
I'd have to look that up. I have no idea.
Yeah, less good. That's what we're gonna say. Anyway,
all I know is that when the Bears need to beat somebody, they were always able to beat the Packers in the Brett Favre years.
I like how you shifted gears in the middle of that sentence, because you're like, I have no way to finish this sentence without lying at all. Whenever the Bears need to beat somebody, awkward pause. Whenever we need to beat the Packers and it matters, and Brett Favre on this one particular day in 1998, damn it.
The year that the Giants beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl, the Packers were in the NFC Championship game. They went 13-3 that year. 2 of those losses were to the Bears.
I'm sorry, what year was that?
That would have been 2008?
Okay. How many years ago was that?
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're doing here. That's fine. All right. Well, he was great to have on. Let's all of you joining us from Pride of Detroit. Thank you so much for doing so, and we appreciate having you on and listening to the show and being a fan of Jeremy and hopefully us. You can get our podcast, FBIA Podcast, Football is America, on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, just about wherever you can find a podcast. That's where you will find us.
You are going to hear plenty of references to the team and the city. We love Robotroit. I like RoboCop quite a bit. It is an allegory for Jesus, and that is interesting.
Also get us on Twitter at FBIA Podcast, FBIApodcast@gmail.com, Football is America, podcast@gmail.com. Just about any medium you can find us on, Google Plus, Facebook. We're all those places.
You can definitely drop us a line. I encourage you to check out the show. You might enjoy it. You could also go, these guys are jackasses, and I hope that their homes burn down. That's another popular opinion. We get a lot of emails about that.
Well, we're going to have to take this one to the end, but thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, the listeners. We appreciate it.
We hope to see you again. This is pre-recorded, so I mean, I'm not seeing anything. I'm not outside your window, creeping, stalking, because I'm not going to Detroit. I don't want to get stabbed.
I think if you were creeping and stalking in Detroit, you would actually just be normal.
I thought what I said was offensive, and then you went ahead and just hit that exponent switch. Well done. So yeah, come back for more of that, Pride of Detroit fans. Just belittling your city.
All right.
You're not coming back, are you?
All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks.